Hey, science kids, welcome back to some more science, some more space science. Space science is cool. We are going to continue our journey through our solar system being our sun and the 8 planets that orbit it. This time, we're going to move outward away from the sun in the same direction of Mars and past it to the very next planet, Jupiter. Dun, dun, dun. The big one, the hugest one, the granddaddy of all planets in our solar system. Yes, this planet is huge and it's really interesting. We are going to learn cool facts about Jupiter. We're going to watch Jupiter videos and you're going to make your very own Jupiter cupcake. So let's get started. Jupiter is cool. All right, first some facts about Jupiter. It's huge. It's really huge. So if this were our planet Earth, this little ping pong ball size thing, how big is Jupiter? Let's demonstrate. I have here a really big balloon. I'm going to show you how big this is. It's going to take a while. Not big enough yet. Getting closer. Okay, I think I did it. That would be how big Jupiter would look like if this were the Earth. You could fit 11 little Earths across the middle of Jupiter. It's huge. Of the 8 planets in our solar system, 4 of them, the 4 closest one, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, are rocky planets. You can land on them. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, the 4 farthest out, are what are called gas giants. There's no ground that we know of, really. The whole surface is made up out of gases. Jupiter is a gas giant. Jupiter is most famous for its great red spot, the big red spot. You can see it right there. What is it? It's a storm, a great big hurricane. You can see it from outer space. It's so big. It would take 3 Earths across to be as big as that storm. And that storm's been going on for about 300 years, scientists think. So what's the deal with the storm? How is it stuck there? Well, my favorite scientist, Bill Nye the Science Guy, is going to explain the storm. Go, Bill.
There's been a storm raging on the planet Jupiter for over 300 years with extraordinary wind and lightning. And nobody knows why or even how big it is, really. It's huge. The Great Red Spot. The Great Red Spot has been on the surface of Jupiter for at least 300 years. It was first observed by Gian Domenico Cassini 3 centuries ago. And he noticed that it seemed to be a big storm on the surface. It's 3 Earth diameters wide. And it hasn't moved. It hasn't gone north or south in all that time. But we really don't know how deep it goes. Is it a thin feature like a piece of paper? Or is it a great big angry wedge of storm that penetrates deep into Jupiter all the way to its core or whatever inside? And we don't know. But this we do know. The Great Red Spot is caught between 2 currents or bands that are moving in opposite direction. It's like a ball bearing between 2 surfaces. As the bands move, the great red ball stays still. Of course, we don't really call it the Great Red Ball. We call it the Great Red Spot. And you got to figure the more we learn about the Great Red Spot, the more we'll know about storms on Jupiter and storms on Earth. You weren't supposed to see that.
So Jupiter sounds like a super cool place. Why don't we go visit it? Why don't we land on it, or try at least? Turns out Jupiter is a cool place to look at from afar. Up close, it's kind of a nightmare. It's certainly not a place I'm going to want to take a vacation to. In fact, I'd like to lay out some reasons why I would never want to vacation on Jupiter. Let's start it. Reason number 1, atmosphere. Well, we've learned on Earth that atmosphere is a good thing. You know, keeps our skin in, traps the sun, keeps us warm, makes sure all the air we're breathing doesn't fly off into space, right? Moon has no atmosphere. We had to bring a spacesuit. And on Mars, it'll have a little atmosphere. So they'll need spacesuits, but maybe not quite so thick. What about Jupiter? Jupiter, being a gas giant, is all atmosphere. It's just made up of gases. Lots and lots and lots of gases. Now, gases kind of act like a blanket. Imagine you're laying on the floor and your friend comes over and starts piling blankets on top of you. 1, 2, 3, not so bad, right? 4, 5, 6, 7,000 million. What are you going to feel like after that? You're going to feel pretty squished. Atmosphere, made up of gases, piled up on top of you, can cause a lot of pressure, a lot of pushing. And that's not so good. So here's a little experiment. My little astronaut would like to go vacation on Jupiter. Ta-da! But there's so much atmosphere, it's gonna act like this weight. What do you think is gonna happen to my little astronaut with all this weight, this pressure on top? Let's find out. Ooh, that did not sound good. You all right down there? No. My astronaut is not all right. My astronaut is squished. And you know what? It wouldn't matter if my astronaut was inside a spaceship, because there's so much pressure on Jupiter that it would squash even the spaceship. Reason number 2, what is in that atmosphere? It's not even breathable atmosphere. It's poison. It's hydrogen and helium. That's the same stuff that makes up the sun. I can't breathe that. Thumbs down. Reason number 3, temperature. All that pressure squashed down creates heat. So even though it's super cold on the outside when you first get there, because Jupiter's farther from the sun, less sun gets there, once you start going into those clouds, it starts to heat up. In fact, not even that far down, it's more than 11,000 degrees, which is hotter than the sun. So thumbs down for temperature. Reason number 4, weather. Jupiter spins a lot faster than the Earth, which means those clouds are being dragged round and round. Makes for a lot of really bad weather. High winds, storms, lightning. Ugh, don't want to go there because of the bad weather. Thumbs down for weather. Reason number 5, well, there's no place to land. Really, honestly, you can't even get down. Well, even if you could get down there, scientists don't even know if there is ground down there. So if you try to land on Jupiter, you might just end up going out the other side. But you're not going to. And here's the reason why.
The way to explore a new world is to land on it. That's why humans have sent spacecraft to the moon, Venus, Mars, Saturn's moon Titan, and more. But there are a few places in the solar system we will never understand as well as we'd like. One of them is Jupiter. Jupiter is made of mostly hydrogen and helium gas, so trying to land on it would be like trying to land on a cloud here on Earth. There's no outer crust to break your fall on Jupiter, just an endless stretch of atmosphere. The big question then is, could you fall through one end of Jupiter and out the other? It turns out, you wouldn't even make it halfway. First things first, Jupiter's atmosphere has no oxygen, so make sure you bring plenty with you to breathe. The next problem is the scorching temperatures, so pack an air conditioner. Now, you're ready for a journey of epic proportions. For scale, here's how many Earths you could stack from Jupiter's center. As you enter the top of the atmosphere, you're traveling at 110,000 miles per hour under the pull of Jupiter's gravity. But brace yourself. You'll quickly hit the denser atmosphere below, which will hit you like a wall. It won't be enough to stop you, though. After about 3 minutes, you'll reach the cloud tops, 155 miles down. Here, you'll experience the full brunt of Jupiter's rotation. Jupiter is actually the fastest rotating planet in our solar system. One day lasts about 9.5 Earth hours. This creates powerful winds that can whip around the planet at more than 300 miles per hour. About 75 miles below the clouds, you reach the limit of human exploration. Galileo probe made it this far when it dove into Jupiter's atmosphere in 1995. It only lasted 58 minutes before losing contact and was eventually destroyed by the crushing pressure. Down here, the pressure is nearly 100 times what it is on Earth's surface. And you won't be able to see anything, so you'll have to rely on instruments to explore your surroundings. By 430 miles down, the pressure is 1,150 times higher. You might be able to survive down here if you were in a spacecraft built like the Trieste submarine, the deepest diving submarine on Earth. Any deeper, and the pressure and the temperature will be too great for the spacecraft to endure. However, let's say that you could find a way to descend even further. You will uncover some of Jupiter's grandest mysteries. But sadly, you'll have no way to tell anyone. Jupiter's deep atmosphere absorbs radio waves, so you'll be shut off from the outside world, unable to communicate. Once you've reached 2,500 miles down, the temperature is 6,100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt tungsten, the metal with the highest melting point in the universe. At this point, you will have been falling for at least 12 hours, and you won't even be halfway through. At 13,000 miles down, you'll reach Jupiter's innermost layer. Here the pressure is 2 million times stronger than that of Earth's surface, and the temperature is hotter than the surface of the sun. These conditions are so extreme that they change the chemistry of hydrogen around you. Hydrogen molecules are forced so close together that their electrons break loose, forming an unusual substance called metallic hydrogen. Metallic hydrogen is highly reflective, so if you tried using lights to see down there, it would be impossible. And it's as dense as a rock. So as you travel deeper, the buoyancy force from the metallic hydrogen counteracts gravity's downward pull. Eventually, that buoyancy will shoot you back up until gravity pulls you right back down, sort of like a yo-yo. And when those two forces equal, you'll be left free-floating in mid-Jupiter, unable to move up or down, and no way of escape. Suffice it to say, trying to land on Jupiter is a bad idea. We may never see what's beneath those majestic clouds, but we can still study and admire this mysterious planet from afar.
So Jupiter has 79 known moons. The 4 largest moons are Io, Europa, Callisto, and Ganymede. Io and Europa are about the size of our moon. Callisto and Ganymede are bigger. Let's start with Ganymede. Ganymede is Jupiter's largest moon. In fact, it's the largest moon in our whole solar system. Other planets in our solar system have moons, but Ganymede is the largest. You would think that something this large might be called a planet, but let's remember that a planet orbits the sun. Ganymede orbits Jupiter. It's a moon. Moving on to Callisto, the second largest moon of Jupiter. It's the 3rd largest moon in the solar system. Callisto is mostly a big mess of craters. Not much going on there. Next we move on to Io. Wow, this moon has a lot going on and it's not good stuff. 250 active volcanoes on Io. That weird color, it's sulfur. The stuff that gets spit out of volcanoes, whew, smells like rotten eggs and poison to breathe. Man, we are not going to be landing on Io anytime soon, but it is a super interesting moon. Finally, let's talk about Europa. Now, as scary, crazy bad as Jupiter is to land on, or try to land on, this moon is interesting. In fact, at this point, NASA is making a probe to go to Europa and study it some more, because this moon, of all the bodies in our solar system, just might have life on it. Why do scientists think there might be life on Europa? Well, they know that Europa is made out of solid ice made out of water. And underneath that ice, scientists think there might be a liquid ocean. And we know, based on what's going on Earth, that where there's water, there might be life. Now, how can that be, you say? It's super cold out there and there's no sunlight underneath all that ice. That's okay. On Earth, if you go way to the bottom of the ocean, there are creatures called extremophiles that can live in those kind of conditions. Now, I'm not talking squid or whale or anything big like that. There's no way that stuff's under there. Well, probably not. But there might be simple life. And if that's the case, it would be the first time we found life on some other planet, some other moon in this case. That would be Europa. This probe that NASA's building is still in its early stages, so I'm not entirely sure what it's going to look like or if it's going to just take pictures or if it's going to land. It's called the Europa Clipper, and it's supposed to launch in the next 10 years or so, and it's going to take about 10 years to get there, so it's going to be a while till we get any information, but I can't wait. NASA has sent 9 probes to study Jupiter. 7 of them have just gone whizzing by and haven't stopped, just taking pictures and maybe some measurements. 2 of them were meant only for Jupiter. The first one, Galileo, even sent a probe into those clouds of Jupiter to see what it could find.
The Galileo probe orbited Jupiter for years, looking at the cloud tops of the planet and the moons that orbit it. But at the end of the mission, they decided they could do one more scientific experiment.
December 7th, 1995. NASA's Galileo spacecraft drops a 750-pound titanium probe into Jupiter's atmosphere. It slams into the cloud tops at over 106,000 miles an hour.
Even though Jupiter looks calm and serene from a distance, as you get closer, you realize that there are ferocious winds, there are lightning storms, and there are pressures that would crush any instrument.
The planet is 1,000 times the mass of the Earth, and that means as you go inward, the pressures and densities become very large.
The probe sensors reveal that hydrogen makes up 90% of Jupiter's atmosphere. Temperatures soar to over 300 degrees. Winds rage at 400 miles an hour. It's hotter and more turbulent than scientists ever imagined. 58 minutes after entering Jupiter's atmosphere and just 95 miles down, the probe vaporizes, leaving most of Jupiter's secrets beyond our reach.
Project time! All right, this snack is a Jupiter cupcake, meaning it's going to be kind of swirly and it's going to have a big red spot. Let's get started. Cooking is cool and yummy.
Here's the recipe for your Jupiter cupcakes. Take a screenshot and print it out so you'll have it when we go over the process next.
If you're pressed for time or really just don't want to deal with the whole cooking idea, you can always go the fast route, which is get a box mix with some eggs, and you still need the red food coloring to put that spot in there. And it doesn't matter if it's a yellow cake or a white cake, either one will do. Here are the items you're going to need to make your Jupiter cupcakes. White sugar, white flour, cocoa powder, salt, baking powder, baking soda, vanilla, 1/4 cup of butter at room temperature, so let it sit out a little bit, some red food coloring, and an egg. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to whisk together our flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. So I have here 1 1/3 cups of flour. There's 1. And here's my third. 1 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Okay. And I need 1/2 teaspoon of my baking soda. And 1/2 teaspoon of my baking powder. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Put that into my one bowl, and I'm going to whisk it together. Mix it up. I'm going to set it aside. Next, I'm going to add my 1/4 cup of room temperature butter, and of course I'll wash my hands, that goes without saying, into my bowl, and I'm going to add a cup of sugar. All right, so maybe not the healthiest treat. And I'm gonna mix them up, either with a hand mixer or a stand mixer, or if you're gonna use a spoon, that's fine too, I suppose, just until they're fluffy. Next, we're gonna add our egg and our vanilla. Now, I'm gonna crack this egg, my one egg, into a measuring cup to make sure, one, there's no blood spots, and two, that there's no shells. If that's all good, yep, it's all good. Dump it in. Next, I need a teaspoon of vanilla. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that most vanilla caps, that is a teaspoon? So I'm just gonna use that instead of having to go find a measuring spoon. There you go. And I'm gonna mix that up too. Next, I'm gonna measure out a cup of buttermilk. Smells like biscuits. Pretty thick stuff, huh? Like super creamy milk. Okay, and I brought my flour back, so I'm gonna use that too. Then next, I'm going to add about 1/3 of the flour and mix it on low speed. Now I'm gonna add half my buttermilk, and mix it on low speed. I'm gonna add more flour, another 1/3, and mix it on low speed. And then I'm gonna add the rest of my buttermilk. And the last of my flour. That looks yummy. What next? Okay, now I'm gonna take a cup of this batter here and add it to a small bowl. We're gonna make the red part. All right. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of unsweetened cocoa powder, of which I don't have a tablespoon, so I'm just gonna use 3 teaspoons. It's the same thing. 1, 2, 3. And I'm gonna add 3/4 teaspoon of red food coloring. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Doesn't have to be exact. It's for color. Now I'm gonna mix it. Mix it real, ooh, that's really red. It almost looks purple. Next, we're gonna fill our lined muffin tins with the white stuff first. Next, I'm gonna add the colored stuff. Last, I want to swirl this together to make it look like Jupiter. You can use a toothpick or a butter knife, but you're just gonna swirl it in there. Not too much, you don't want to mix it in, but we do want to make it all swirly-like inside. And finally, because it is Jupiter, we want to add that great red spot. Yeah, it does stain your fingers, so no, that's not blood on me, that is actually food coloring. I'm gonna add a dot of red on the edge if I can, so that it soaks down in there on the side onto each cupcake. All right, we're gonna go bake them 18 to 20 minutes until the toothpick comes out dry. Well, they're done. Should we see how they taste? Let's see, let's try this one. Ooh. Guess the big spot didn't make it all the way through, but I bet it's not gonna matter. It is swirly like Jupiter. Jupiter's pretty tasty too. Thumbs up. Well, that's all I have this week on Jupiter. Jupiter is a pretty amazing planet. And the moons are cool too. Jupiter and its moons are cool. And science is cool.